In the corner of the lunchroom, where shadows seemed to linger, even under fluorescent lights, sat 7-year-old Jamie, alone at a table meant for 12, his faded secondhand clothes and scuffed shoes marking him as different, his eyes fixed on his lap to avoid meeting the stares and whispers that followed him like persistent ghosts through the hallways of Westbrook Elementary. The other children kept their distance as if poverty might be contagious, their laughter cutting through the cafeteria noise like shards of glass, until the day everything changed. The day Jamie, with nothing left to lose, finally found the courage that had been hiding beneath his worn-out sweater. If this story of childhood cruelty transformed into unexpected courage touches something deep in your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel now, so you never miss another powerful tale about the extraordinary strength that can emerge from the most vulnerable among us when pushed to their breaking point. Jamie hadn't always been the invisible boy before his father's accident, before the medical bills, before his mother started working 3 jobs. He had been just another kid with friends and birthday parties and clothes that didn't come from donation boxes. But 7 months of hardship had transformed him into a ghost, drifting through the school day unnoticed, except when Blake Anderson, the 4th grade terror, needed someone to torment. Mornings began before sunrise. Jamie, waking to the sound of his mother's keys as she left for her early shift at the diner, he would lie still for a few moments, gathering courage before sliding from beneath the thin blanket, careful not to wake 5-year-old Lily, who shared his room in their 1-bedroom apartment. Dad, sleeping on the pull-out couch, his back too damaged to climb into a real bed. Even if they had space for one, Jamie had become the morning parent, helping Lily dress, making simple breakfast, usually peanut butter toast, and filling her thermos with juice before walking her to the neighbor's apartment, where she stayed until preschool began. The neighbor, Mrs. Gonzalez, never charged them for watching Lily. Understanding, broke better than most, Jamie would kiss his sister goodbye, promising to pick her up after school, then begin his solitary walk to Westbrook Elementary. The journey taking him from their rundown apartment complex through increasingly nicer neighborhoods until he reached the school with its manicured lawns and colorful playground where children arrived in shiny SUVs wearing clothes with recognizable brands. Jamie had mapped the safest routes through Westbrook's hallways, avoiding the main thoroughfares where Blake and his followers congregated early morning, meant slipping through the side entrance near the janitor's closet, Mr. Patel nodding silently as Jamie passed, never commenting on his earliness. His classes meant keeping his head down, eyes on his paper, raising his hand only when absolutely necessary. Sitting in the back corner where teachers often forgot he existed, recess meant finding the bench behind the equipment shed where he could read the dog-eared library books that had become his only friends. Lunchtime was the worst, the unavoidable social showcase where hierarchies were displayed and reinforced. Jamie had learned to arrive last when seats were already claimed, the only available spots being the empty spaces. No one wanted the end of the reject table, or better yet, the small table in the corner allegedly reserved for students with allergies, but never actually used for that purpose. On good days, he would have his lunch packed at home, usually a single sandwich with whatever was available, sometimes just bread and butter. When things were especially tight on bad days, when there wasn't enough food at home for lunch, he would sit with an empty space in front of him, pretending he wasn't hungry. Today was a bad day. Jamie's stomach growled as he watched other children unwrap elaborate lunches, comparing, trading, complaining about perfectly good food, while he tried to focus on his book, a battered copy of Where the Red Fern Grows found in a free box outside the library. He was so engrossed he didn't notice Blake approaching until a shadow fell across the page. "What you reading, poor boy?" Blake asked, his voice carrying just enough for nearby tables to hear, not loud enough to attract teacher attention. Jamie didn't respond, had learned that engagement only prolonged the inevitable. His silence seemed to irritate Blake, who snatched the book from his hands. "This looks stupid," Blake announced, flipping through pages with exaggerated disgust. Probably stolen anyway, bet your family can't even afford books. Jamie kept his eyes down, focused on a scratch in the table's surface, counting silently, the way the school counselor had suggested for managing emotions, though he'd only seen her once after the incident with the gym clothes, when he'd been found crying in the bathroom. "Give it back, please," he whispered the words, barely audible. Blake's laugh was sharp. "Look at that, it talks." He held the book higher as Jamie finally looked up, meeting his tormentor's eyes. Blake was everything Jamie wasn't tall for: his age-confident, expensive sneakers that lit up when he walked, parents who volunteered at school, events the type of boy teachers smiled at, indulgently even when he misbehaved, because he was charming when he needed to be Jamie's opposite in every way that mattered at Westbrook Elementary. "What'll you give me for it?" Blake asked. "I know you don't have money. Maybe you can shine my shoes with your shirt." He snickered, glancing around to ensure his audience appreciated his wit. Jamie saw Zoe Chen at a nearby table, quickly looking away when their eyes met. She never participated in his torment, but never stopped it either. No one ever did. "Just give it back," Jamie said, his voice slightly stronger. Desperation overriding caution. The book was due back tomorrow, and he couldn't afford late fees. Blake pretended to consider, then with deliberate cruelty, dropped the book into Jamie's water cup, the small paper container collapsing, liquid seeping into the pages. "Got it wet." "Sorry," he said with mock concern. "Better let it dry." Poor boy Jim, who watched helplessly as Blake sauntered away, high-fiving friends who laughed on cue at the entertainment. Carefully, he extracted the book from the puddle-blotting pages with his napkin, knowing it was ruined, knowing he would have to explain, knowing the librarian would add this to his family's mounting debts. A small amount to others, perhaps, but significant in his precarious world. What no one at Westbrook Elementary understood was that beneath Jamie's silence lived a boy who still remembered what it felt like to belong, who still dreamed at night of laughter and friendship, instead of the echoing loneliness that followed him through each waking hour. His father had been a construction foreman, once respected, hardworking, a man who taught Jamie to build things with his hands, to solve problems, to stand tall. They had lived in a small but comfortable house with a yard where Jamie had a bicycle and a tree fort. His mother had worked part-time at the library, bringing home books and stories, her smile easy, her hands not yet roughened by endless cleaning shifts. Jamie had become an expert at making himself invisible, a ghost child who moved through hallways, pressed against walls, who lowered his eyes whenever someone glanced his way. But invisibility comes with a price. When you disappear completely, sometimes you forget the way back to being seen. Miss Abernathy noticed things other teachers missed: the quiet ones, the hiding ones, the hungry ones. 20 years of teaching had tuned her attention to the unspoken stories that filled her classroom. She had watched Jamie Matthews since his first day at Westbrook, saw how he folded into himself smaller each week. She noticed when he stopped bringing lunch, how his clothes grew more worn, his eyes more shadowed, how he flinched at loud noises or sudden movements, classic signs she recognized from workshops on childhood trauma and poverty. On Tuesday morning, she arrived earlier than usual, placing a package of granola bars in Jamie's desk, tucked beneath his math workbook. When the children filed in, she pretended not to notice Jamie's confusion at finding them. The quick way he glanced around, then slipped them into his backpack without a word. Miss Abernathy turned to the board, beginning the lesson on fractions, knowing some problems couldn't be solved with direct confrontation, knowing sometimes help had to arrive silently sideways like morning light. Through a narrow window for art class that afternoon, Miss Abernathy brought in watercolors, announcing a special project: landscape paintings inspired by their neighborhoods. Jamie hesitated when supplies were distributed, holding the brush awkwardly until Miss Abernathy demonstrated the technique. The moment color touched paper, something shifted in him, a focus she hadn't seen before emerging as he mixed colors with Surprising skill, his painting taking shape, unlike the others who created typical childlike houses and trees. Jamie's watercolor showed a construction site scaffold rising against sunset clouds. A single figure atop it, arms outstretched, Miss Abernathy, paused behind him, watching transformation occur through his fingertips. "That's beautiful, Jamie," she said softly. "You have a real talent." He startled at her words, brush freezing mid-stroke, a droplet of blue spreading across the paper like a tiny lake. "It's my dad," he whispered, before he got hurt. "He built things." Miss Abernathy nodded, encouraging. "Now you're building things too with paint." Instead of steel, Jamie ducked his head, but she caught the ghost of a smile before he returned to his work. She moved away. She noticed Zoe Chen, watching from the next table, her own painting forgotten. Miss Abernathy had noticed Zoe, too, another quiet one, but different. Her silence seemed chosen, rather than imposed, her academic performance stellar, despite her apparent shyness when the bell rang, signaling cleanup. Zoe approached Jamie's desk wordlessly, offering her colored pencils to add detail to his nearly dry painting. Jamie hesitated, then accepted their fingers briefly touching in the exchange. Miss Abernathy, pretending to organize papers while watching this small connection blossom later that day, Miss Abernathy found Jamie in the hallway during lunch period, sitting against the wall, knees drawn up to his chest. "Aren't you eating in the cafeteria?" she asked, though. She knew the answer. Jamie shook his head, eyes on his sneakers, one sole peeling away from the canvas. "Would you like to help me organize the classroom library?" She offered it could use a student's perspective in the classroom. Jamie relaxed gradually as they sorted books by genre, then reading level, his knowledge surprising her as he correctly identified where each belonged, his hands gentle with their worn spines, the respect of a fellow book lover. "You have a favorite?" Miss Abernathy asked. "Shiloh," Jamie answered immediately, "and where the red fern grows, I had to return it, though." She noticed his voice catch it got damaged. Miss Abernathy made a mental note, adding this to her growing understanding of Jamie Matthews. The next morning, a new copy of Where the Red Fern Grows appeared on his desk, a sticky note inside reading, "Classroom copy. Please enjoy." The school counselor, Mrs. Peterson, stopped by Miss Abernathy's room during planning period, asking about Jamie. "I'm concerned," she said, "he's not engaging with other students. Appears withdrawn, possibly depressed. Classic adjustment issues for a child experiencing economic instabilities." Abernathy considered her response. He's adjusting in his own way, connecting. Through academics, particularly reading and art, I've seen improvements. Mrs. Peterson frowned, checking boxes on her clipboard. "I'll schedule him for group therapy sessions, targeting social skills. Perhaps arrange a big buddy from 5th grade. Miss Abernathy hesitated, knowing Jamie would withdraw further under such spotlight. "He needs gentler approaches." She suggested small opportunities to connect without pressure, natural integration, but Mrs. Peterson was already planning interventions according to district protocols, her good intentions wrapped in bureaucratic solutions that rarely fit individual children. At home, Jamie unwrapped the granola bars after Lily fell asleep, carefully breaking one in half, saving the larger portion for tomorrow's lunch. He didn't question their appearance, accepting them as one accepts unexpected rain during drought. With silent gratitude, the rumbling in his stomach quieted slightly as he chewed. Sitting at their small kitchen table, homework spread before him. His mother wouldn't be home for hours, her cleaning shift at the hospital ending at midnight. His father asleep already in the living room, medication making him drowsy, constant pain making him distant. Jamie worked through math problems, then language arts finally opening. Miss Abernathy's book reading by the dim kitchen light, losing himself in the story of two hunting dogs, their loyalty, their courage. He was so absorbed. He didn't hear the apartment door open, didn't notice his mother, until she placed a hand on his shoulders. "Still up, sweetie?" she asked, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. Her waitress uniform exchanged for hospital scrubs badge, still clipped to her pocket. Jamie smiled at her, the real smile he saved for family, just reading. He showed her the book Miss Abernathy let me borrow it. His mother touched the cover gently. You always loved this one, she said. I used to read it to you, remember? Before she swallowed the before hanging unspoken between them. I'm glad you have a nice teacher. Jamie nodded, not mentioning the granola bars or the watercolors or Zoe's colored pencils. Protective of these small kindnesses, as if speaking of them might make them disappear. Any homework, she asked, removing her shoes, sighing, as her feet expanded in freedom. All done, he assured her. You should sleep, Mom. I can make lunch for Lily tomorrow. She kissed his forehead, the scent of industrial cleaner and hospital soap surrounding her like an aura. Thank you, Jamie. Bear don't know what I'd do without my big helper. After she shuffled to bed, Jamie returned to his book, reading one more chapter before carefully marking his place. Returning it to his backpack where Blake couldn't find it tomorrow, he would finish his painting. Maybe Zoe would share her pencils again. Maybe Miss Abernathy would smile at him. These small possibilities glowing like distant stars in the darkness of his circumstances. The granola bar sat untouched in his pocket all day, not because Jamie wasn't hungry, but because he'd learned that kindness often came with hidden costs, expectations. He couldn't meet demands for gratitude he didn't know how to express better, to save it, better to wait, better to rely only on himself. The lesson of 7 difficult months etched into his 7-year-old heart. The announcement came during morning assembly. Mrs. Whitman, the principal, standing on stage with practiced enthusiasm. Westbrook Elementary will be taking our annual trip to the Natural History Museum in 2 weeks, she declared. Permission slips will go home today. The cost is $15 per student. Please return signed forms with payment. By next Friday, Jamie felt his stomach sink. $15 might as well be $1,500 in his family's current situation. He accepted the bright yellow paper when Miss Abernathy distributed them carefully, folding it into his math workbook. Rather than his backpack, where it might get crushed, he would show his mother. Though he already knew what would happen, her face would crumple momentarily before she forced a smile, promising to figure something out. Then she would pick up extra shifts, exhausting herself further for this one normal childhood experience. At lunch, Jamie sat in his usual corner, eating half a peanut butter sandwich and the saved portion of yesterday's granola bar, his mind calculating what $15 meant in their household economy. 3 days of bus fare for his mother, 2 bottles of discount pain medication for his father, school supplies Lily needed for preschool projects, a week of lunches. He watched other children already discussing the field trip, their excitement bubbling over, comparing which exhibits they wanted to see, planning to bring spending money for the gift shop. Blake wandered past Jamie's table, flaunting the $20 bill his father had already given him for the trip, but Jamie barely registered the taunt. His thoughts tangled in more immediate concerns: how to ask about the field trip, how to say he understood if it wasn't possible, how to hide his disappointment when Miss Abernathy collected permission slips. He was so distracted he didn't notice Blake doubling back until the older boy was beside his table. "What's this?" Blake asked, snatching Jamie's backpack. Before he could react, dumping the contents onto the table: pencil, Stubbs eraser shavings, dog-eared library card scattering across the surface, along with a photograph Jamie normally kept hidden in the side pocket, a creased family picture from before. The accident showing his father strong and straight, standing beside a backyard grill, Jamie on his shoulders, both laughing. His mother and baby Lily smiling up at them. "Oh, look at rich boy," Blake sneered, grabbing the photo before Jamie could save it, showing it to his friends. "Daddy doesn't look so broken here," he taunted. "What happened? Did he fall off his high horse? This what you dream about?" Poor boy, the good old days. Jamie lunged for the photo, hands shaking. "Give it back. It's mine." Blake held it higher. "That's not what my dad says. He says your dad was careless. That's why he fell. That's why he can't work. That insurance shouldn't pay for people who don't follow safety rules." Jamie froze. His father's accident had been caused by faulty scaffolding. Collapse investigation had proven no worker error, a settlement still pending, and endless legal proceedings. The unfairness of Blake's words pierced through Jamie's carefully constructed walls. Something hot and unfamiliar rising in his chest. "Dad doesn't know anything," Jamie whispered, surprising himself with the defiance. Blake's expression darkened. "What did you say?" Jamie reached again for the photo, but Blake crumpled it, tossing it to the floor, stomping on it with deliberate cruelty. The cafeteria monitor, finally noticing the commotion approaching with weary authority. "Is there a problem, boys?" she asked, just helping poor boy pick up his stuff. Blake answered immediately. Voice transformed to innocent helpfulness. Things fell out of his backpack. Jamie knelt silently, gathering his belongings, including the crushed photograph, smoothing it carefully before returning it to his pocket. The monitor moved on, satisfied with apparent resolution. The bell rang, signaling afternoon classes. As Jamie walked away, Blake hissed menacingly, "This isn't over, freak," that evening. Jamie's mother examined the permission slip at their small kitchen table. Lips pursed in concentration. "Of course you should go," she said after a moment. "I'll figure it out. Maybe ask for an advance at the diner." Jamie shook his head, knowing she'd been denied advances before. "You don't have to, Mom. It's not important." His mother reached across the table, taking his small hand in her work. "Roughened one. It is important. Jamie, experiences like this matter. Education matters." She squared her shoulders with determination. "I promised you when we moved that things would get better. They will. But until then, we're going to make sure you don't miss out on what matters later." After his mother left for her night shift, Jamie took out the damaged photograph, studying his father's face, remembering the strength in those arms when they built models together, when they fixed the leaky kitchen faucet, when they installed shelves. In Lily's room, his father had taught him practical things: how tools worked, how to measure twice cut once, how to solve problems step by step. He missed those lessons, missed the father who had energy and laughter before pain medications dulled his eyes, before bill collectors called daily, before shame bent his shoulders more effectively than the physical injury. The next morning, heavy rain turned the walk to school into an obstacle course. Jamie's worn sneakers soaked through within minutes, puddles seeping through canvas directly to his socks. By the time he reached Westbrook, his feet were freezing, his pant cuffs dark with water. He tried to dry them in the bathroom using paper towels, but they remained damp throughout math class. His toes numb inside squelching shoes when Miss Abernathy called him to solve a problem on the board. He left wet footprints along the aisle, causing several students to snicker. At home that evening, he stuffed newspaper into his sneakers, hoping they might dry overnight, but morning revealed them still wet, molding slightly around the edges. With resignation, Jamie opened the hall closet where they kept their limited belongings, finding his father's old work boots far too large, but the only alternative. He stuffed the toes with extra socks, laced them tightly, shuffling rather than walking to avoid tripping. Blake's reaction was immediate and merciless. "Look at clown shoes," he announced loudly in the hallway. "Where'd you get those from the dumpster?" Jamie tried to hurry past, but one oversized boot caught on the slick floor, sending him sprawling, books scattering, Blake's laughter echoing down the corridor. Soon joined by others, Miss Abernathy emerged from her classroom, helping Jamie gather his things. Pretending not to notice his humiliation or the tears he fought to contain, science class brought unexpected hope. Mr. Jensen announcing the annual science fair competition open to all grades. Prizes awarded for creativity, scientific method presentation. Individual or partner projects welcomed. Jamie felt a flicker of interest, remembering how he and his father had built a working model volcano last year. Taking third place at his previous school, Mr. Jensen described project categories: environmental, science, physical science, earth science, biological science. Jamie's mind already cataloging possibilities, focusing on something beyond immediate hardships for the first time in weeks as Mr. Jensen distributed information packets. Jamie found himself actually reading the requirements, considering potential experiments, When Miss Abernathy announced student partnerships for those who wanted to work together, Jamie assumed he would work alone as usual, but heard his name paired with Zoe Chen, the quiet girl who had shared her colored pencils, who sometimes looked at him without judgment or pity. Jamie had taught himself not to cry, had practiced in the bathroom mirror at home, until he could hold tears inside like water behind a dam, but as he knelt collecting soggy sandwich pieces from the dirty floor, something inside him shifted, the first hairline crack in a wall that had been building since the day his father fell from the scaffolding. Over the next 2 weeks, Jamie and Zoe fell into a rhythm, meeting at the library every Saturday morning after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Their project took shape: diagrams, materials lists, hypotheses, carefully documented in the notebook they shared. Zoe provided most supplies: plastic bottles, mesh screens, coffee filters, while Jamie contributed design knowledge, the mechanical understanding that came naturally to him. They worked well together. Zoe's methodical approach balancing Jamie's intuitive problem-solving. Her quiet presence never demanding conversation, but accepting it when offered as they tested different combinations of sand, charcoal, gravel, measuring water clarity before and after filtration. Jamie found himself relaxing. Around Zoe, she never mentioned his clothes or lunch or family situation, focusing instead on their shared work, occasionally sharing small details about herself: her parents' immigration from China, her father's job as an engineer, her mother's evening accounting classes, her own struggle with English. During kindergarten, I was silent for almost a year, she told Jamie as they recorded results from their latest test. Afraid to speak because my words came out wrong. Jamie looked up surprised. "You were?" Zoe nodded matter-of-factly. "Everyone thought I couldn't understand, but I understood everything, just couldn't make my mouth form the right sounds." The parallel to his own silence hung between them, unspoken, but acknowledged. Jamie adjusted the layer of charcoal in their latest filter prototype. "We need finer sand for this one," he said, changing the subject. But something had shifted, a recognition of shared experience. However different their circumstances, Miss Abernathy noticed the change in Jamie, how he occasionally raised his hand in class, how his shoulders gradually straightened, how he sometimes spoke with Zoe during group activities. She mentioned it to Mr. Jensen after school one day, stopping by his classroom as he prepared for the next day's lessons. "Jamie Matthews is doing remarkably well with that science project," she observed. "He seems more engaged overall." Jensen nodded. "Surprised me too. He's got real talent for experimental design." Zoe says he's the one who figured out the filtration system. His ideas about measurement tools, testing, protocols, pretty sophisticated for a second grader, Miss. Abernathy smiled thoughtfully. "I wonder if we could get him involved in the school engineering club." Jensen's eyebrows rose. "That's usually 4th and 5th graders. Perhaps an exception," Miss Abernathy suggested. "Sometimes what these kids need is simply to be seen for their capabilities rather than their circumstances." The following Saturday brought a new development in Jamie and Zoe's partnership. When they met at the library, Zoe seemed hesitant, fidgeting with her pencil before finally speaking. "My mom says we should work at our apartment next time." She offered, watching Jamie carefully. "We have a bigger table, better light." She paused, sensing his discomfort. "You don't have to, but it might be easier for the next phase." Jamie considered the invitation, torn between caution and curiosity. Zoe had never been anything but kind, never given him reason for distrust. "What's your place like?" he asked. Finally, Zoe described her family's apartment in Greenridge Heights, the same complex where Jamie now lived, though in a different building, her matter-of-fact tone suggesting she had no idea they were neighbors. The coincidence startled Jamie. "You live in Greenridge too," he admitted, building. Zoe's eyes widened. "We're in building F, yeah," she said, then smiled slightly. "We could walk together." That afternoon, Jamie found himself following Zoe up the stairs to her family's 3rd-floor apartment nerves fluttering in his stomach as she unlocked the door, calling out in Chinese to announce their arrival. The space that greeted him was small, but immaculate. Sparsely furnished but comfortable plants on the windowsills, books stacked neatly on shelves, family photographs displayed proudly on walls. Mrs. Chen emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, greeting Jamie with a warm smile, speaking first to Zoe in Chinese, then to Jamie in accented English. "Welcome to our home." She said, "Please sit. I have snacks." For studying, Jamie sat carefully at the dining table, watching Zoe arrange their project materials. The familiar routine in unfamiliar surroundings, Mrs. Chen brought a plate of sliced apples and cookies, then retreated, giving them space to work. Occasionally, Jamie caught her watching from the kitchen, her expression thoughtful. The apartment reminded Jamie of his family's home before smaller, but with the same sense of pride, careful arrangement of limited possessions. He relaxed gradually, focusing on their work as Zoe explained her ideas for improving the filtration system. They had lost themselves in measurement calculations when Mr. Chen arrived home from his engineering job, greeting Jamie with the same matter-of-fact warmth, asking questions about their project, examining their design with professional interest. "Very clever," he said. After Zoe explained Jamie's sand filtration system, "You understand mechanical principles." He directed this to Jamie. "Have you considered adding activated carbon layer here?" Pointing to their diagram, "It would remove chemical impurities." Jamie nodded. "I thought about that, but didn't know where to get it." Mr. Chen smiled. "I have some in my workshop you can use." He disappeared, returning with a small container explaining properties applications. Jamie listened with rapt attention, absorbing information, like the thirsty soil of a drought-stricken garden. When dinner time approached, Jamie reluctantly packed his belongings, knowing Lily would be waiting, but Mrs. Chen intercepted him. "Would you stay for dinner? She invited your parents too, if they would like." Jamie hesitated, thinking of his father's difficulty leaving the apartment, his mother's evening shift, the explanation too complicated. To voice instead, he simply thanked her, explaining he needed to care for his sister. Promising to come again the following Saturday, Mr. Chen insisted on driving him home, despite Jamie's protests that he lived nearby. The car ride lasted only minutes, confirming how close they actually lived. Mr. Chen pulled up outside Jamie's building, far shabbier than their own, its exterior showing years of neglected maintenance. Jamie's stomach clenched, waiting for the inevitable judgment, the awkward realization of his poverty. But Mr. Chen merely smiled, saying he looked forward to seeing Jamie again next weekend before driving away. Jamie stood, watching the car disappear around the corner, something warm and unfamiliar expanding in his chest at home. Jamie helped Lily with her bath while his father dozed on the couch, the television murmuring in the background halfway through their simple dinner of boxed pasta. His father asked about the science project, listening with genuine interest. As Jamie described the filtration system, Mr. Chen's suggestions, "Sounds like good people." Robert commented, "Maybe we should have them over sometime." Jamie's fork paused midair. "Dad, we can't." He began thinking of their cramped space, broken furniture, secondhand everything. His father's expression shifted not to anger, but to sadness. "I know things aren't like they used to be, Jamie boy, but we still have something to offer. Hospitality doesn't require fancy houses or expensive food, just genuine welcome," he sighed, rubbing his beard, which had grown untrimmed during his depression phase. "Maybe I'm ready to have people over again. Maybe it's time." Jamie studied his father, seeing beyond the pain-lined face, the slumped shoulders, to the man who had taught him to build too, create to solve problems. Something stirring in his heart, a recognition that his father was still there beneath the layers of suffering, still trying to emerge. Jamie's fingers moved with surprising confidence, adjusting wires, connecting tubes, his father's hands somehow living in his own, as if the skills had been passed down through touch and memory. The first time in months, he'd felt something like pride stirring beneath the layers of shame. The science fair was scheduled for Friday morning projects to be set up. Before school, judged during first period winners. Announced at lunch, Jamie arrived earlier than usual, balancing their carefully constructed water filtration system in his arms, Zoe meeting him at the side entrance with their display board, measurement charts, and water samples. The gymnasium had been transformed into an exhibition hall, long tables arranged in rows-numbered spaces, awaiting elementary scientists of varying abilities. Miss Abernathy spotted them struggling with their materials, immediately coming to help find our future engineers, she said cheerfully. Guiding them to their assigned table, assisting as they arranged the components, Jamie carefully connecting the tubes, checking flow rates, adjusting the layers of filtration material. Zoe organizing their documentation, the early morning light streaming through high windows, illuminating their work, their display complete. Jamie stepped back, surveying it with critical eye, making minor adjustments. The science fair wouldn't begin officially for another hour, but already other students were arriving, setting up volcanoes, solar system models, plant growth experiments, the familiar excited tensions of competition filling the air. Jamie caught sight of Blake across the gymnasium, working with his partner Tyler. Their project involving electromagnets, considerably more sophisticated than most likely built with significant parental assistance. Blake noticed Jamie looking, raised one eyebrow in silent challenge. Zoe touched Jamie's arm, drawing his attention back to their own work. "We should test it one more time." She suggested, her practical nature centering him. He nodded, focusing on the task, pouring murky water into their first filter, watching it travel through the carefully constructed layers, emerging clearer with each stage, the system working exactly as designed. Satisfaction warming his chest as teachers and students began filling the gymnasium. Zoe surprised Jamie by pulling a small tablet from her backpack. "I borrowed this from my dad," she explained, positioning it carefully behind their display, setting it to record our presentation. "He might want to see it," Jamie nodded, understanding her father's interest in their engineering project, not realizing the dual purpose the tablet would serve. Before he could comment, Miss Abernathy called for students to leave their projects for first period classes. Judging would occur. While they were gone all morning, Jamie found concentration impossible, his mind returning to the gymnasium, the water filters, the judges circulating with clipboards. His first real chance to prove himself in this new school. Beside him, Zoe seemed equally distracted, usually perfect penmanship deteriorating as she repeatedly glanced at the clock. When lunch finally arrived, they hurried to the gymnasium, finding a crowd already gathered around the judges' table, awaiting results. Principal Whitman stood at the microphone. "Before we announce winners, please take time to view all the excellent projects our students have created. The gymnasium will remain open during lunch for viewing." She gestured to the rows of tables now bearing ribbons of various colors. Jamie and Zoe made their way to their table, hope and anxiety battling in Jamie's chest as they approached. He saw it immediately, a blue ribbon attached to their display board. First place, second grade division. Zoe let out a small sound of delight as Jamie stood frozen, disbelieving, until Miss Abernathy appeared beside them. "Congratulations, you two," she said, her smile wide. "The judges were particularly impressed with your engineering design and water quality testing methods." Jamie reached out, touching the ribbon gently. "We really won," he whispered. Miss Abernathy nodded. "Absolutely earned through excellent scientific thinking and teamwork." She glanced at her watch. "Why don't you get lunch, then? Come back to show visitors how your project works. Several judges want to see it in action again." As they turned to leave, Blake and Tyler approached their own project, sporting a red second-place ribbon. Blake's expression dark with frustration. "How'd you cheat Matthews?" he demanded loud, enough for nearby students to hear. "No way, you built this yourself." Jamie stepped back automatically, but Zoe moved forward. "We didn't cheat," she stated firmly, her voice quiet but clear. "We worked very hard." Blake ignored her, focusing his anger on Jamie. "You're just a poor kid living in the trashy apartments. You can't even afford lunch. How'd you afford this?" He gestured dismissively at their project, then reached forward, shoving the central filter column. Jamie lunged to stabilize it, but too late. The carefully constructed system toppled tubes, disconnecting water samples, spilling across the table, soaking their documentation. Blake feigned innocence as nearby teachers turned at the commotion. "Oh, sorry," he said, with mock concern. "Did I break?" Poor boy's project. Miss Abernathy arrived quickly, assessing the situation, her expression unusually stern. "What happened here?" she asked. Jamie stared at the destroyed project, months of work, ruined in seconds. Speech failed him as familiar shame and helplessness flooded back, Blake already launching into explanation about accidentally bumping the table. Miss Abernathy listened, her eyes narrowing slightly. It wasn't an accident. Zoe's voice cut through Blake's narrative. He pushed it over on purpose. She reached for her father's tablet, turning the screen toward Miss Abernathy. It was recording. Miss Abernathy took the tablet, viewing the footage that had captured the entire incident. Her expression hardening, Blake's face paling, as he realized his actions had been documented. Principal Whitman's office. "Now," she said to Blake, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Tyler, you too," she added when Blake's friend attempted to slink away. As they were led away, Jamie knelt, trying to salvage what remained of their project, water dripping from the table edge onto his shoes. Zoe beside him, gathering soggy papers. Principal Whitman appeared, requesting the tablet as evidence. Jamie barely registered the conversation. His focus narrowed to the destroyed filters, broken connections, scattered materials. The triumph of moments before washed away as completely as their murky water samples. "I'm so sorry," Zoe whispered. "It's ruined." Jamie continued working methodically, draining remaining water, disconnecting damaged sections, evaluating what could be saved, what needed replacement. His father's training asserting itself in crisis. Assess the damage, identify the solution, implement repairs. His hands moved automatically while his mind processed the deliberate cruelty of Blake's action, the weeks of work destroyed in seconds, the unfairness burning in his chest. Mr. Jensen arrived, offering paper towels, assistance, encouragement. "We can fix this," he assured them. "Postpone your demonstration until after lunch. Gives you time to rebuild." The judges already made their decision. "The ribbon stands," Jamie nodded, not trusting his voice hands. Still moving through salvage operations as Mr. Jensen was called away. Zoe leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "I'm glad my dad's tablet was recording." She said, "Blake will get in trouble?" Now Jamie looked up, suddenly understanding. She had positioned the tablet specifically to watch their project, anticipating potential sabotage. Her foresight astounding him. "You knew he might do something?" he whispered. Zoe shrugged slightly. "I noticed how he looked at you during setup," she admitted. "He always looks for ways to hurt you." She hesitated. "I just thought we should be prepared." Jamie returned to their damaged project. This new information shifting his perspective. Zoe had not only been his partner, but his protector, anticipating threats, developing countermeasures without even telling him. As the judges moved to the next display, Jamie felt something shift inside him. Not sadness, not resignation, but a hot, burning feeling. He barely recognized rage at the unfairness that someone could destroy with such casual cruelty what had taken weeks of hope to build. Jamie barely spoke on the walk home that afternoon, the blue ribbon clutched in his hand, seeming simultaneously precious and hollow. Zoe had helped him partially rebuild their project, enough for basic demonstration, but the delicate calibration, the careful balance of materials had been lost. Something once beautiful reduced to merely functional. He'd thanked her woodenly before departing, alone needing space to process the tumult of emotions. The triumph and devastation occurring in such rapid succession at home. He found his father more alert than usual, sitting at the kitchen table, rather than the couch newspaper spread before him. A pencil marking classified ads. His mother had left a note explaining she'd taken Lily to a dentist appointment they'd return by dinner. Jamie placed the blue ribbon on the table without comment, heading toward his room when his father's voice stopped him. "What's this?" Robert asked, lifting the ribbon, his tone curious. Jamie turned reluctantly. "We won." "First place," he said then. After a pause, "Blake Anderson destroyed our project right after." His father's expression shifted, concern replacing pride. What happened? The story spilled out, Jamie's words coming faster, as he described the weeks of work, the careful design, the judging, the victory, then Blake's accusation, the deliberate sabotage, the tablet recording his voice rising with each detail, his hands gesturing in unusual animation as the emotions he'd suppressed all day finally found outlet. His father listened without interruption until Jamie concluded, with Miss Abernathy escorting Blake to the principal's office. "You must have been furious," Robert said finally. Jamie nodded, surprised by his father's matter-of-fact acknowledgement of an emotion he'd been taught to control, to hide, to suppress. "Good," Robert continued. "That's appropriate. When someone destroys something you've created, something you care about, you should feel angry." He leaned forward slightly. "What matters is what you do with that anger." Jamie sat across from his father, confused by this unexpected response. Teachers, counselors always emphasized calming techniques, deep breaths, counting to 10, walking away. "What do you mean?" he asked. Robert adjusted his position, wincing slightly as he shifted his damaged back. "Anger can destroy you if you let it eat you up inside, or it can fuel positive change. Son, it can motivate you to stand up for yourself, to set boundaries, to demand respect." He studied Jamie's face. "What would you like to say to Blake if you could say anything without consequences?" Jamie hesitated, never having considered this possibility, words tumbling out before he could censor them. "I'd tell him he's a coward. I'd tell him hurting people doesn't make him important. I'd tell him to leave me alone." His father nodded. "That all sounds reasonable. Not mean, not vengeful, just honest. What's stopping you from saying exactly that next time he bothers you?" Jamie stared at his father, the question revealing assumptions so fundamental he'd never examined them. "I'd get in trouble. Blake might hurt me worse. People would laugh." Robert considered each answer. "Let's examine those concerns one by one. Getting in trouble for standing up for yourself respectfully, not physically, but with words, that's unlikely unless you're at a very unreasonable school. As for Blake, hurting you worse, that's possible. Bullies often escalate when challenged, but they also respect strength. Sometimes the only way to end bullying is to face it directly, and people laughing." He shrugged. "That happens, whether you stand up for yourself or not, doesn't it?" Jamie couldn't argue with this last point. Laughter, mockery, whispers had been his constant companions regardless of how small. He tried to make himself how invisible. The difference, Robert continued, is how you feel about yourself afterward. Do you want to be someone who lets others decide his worth, or someone who declares his own value? Even when it's difficult, Jamie thought about Zoe positioning the tablet, anticipating the attack, preparing a defense without fanfare or recognition, her quiet courage protecting both of them. He thought about Miss Abernathy, noticing his hunger, his talent, his isolation, offering help without demanding gratitude. He thought about his mother working multiple jobs without complaint to keep them housed, fed together. Her exhaustion never diminishing her determination. He came from strong people. He realized people who faced hardship without surrendering their dignity. "I want to stand up for myself," Jamie whispered, the admission feeling like a door opening to an unfamiliar room. His father smiled, the expression transforming his pain-lined face, revealing the man who had once lifted Jamie to his shoulders, who had taught him to swim, to ride a bike, to build things. "That's my boy." That night, Jamie lay awake, replaying the day's events in his mind. But instead of focusing on Blake's destruction, his thoughts returned to the moment the judges announced their victory, the validation of weeks of work, the recognition of his abilities. He remembered Zoe's quiet excitement, Miss Abernathy's genuine pride, Mr. Jensen's encouraging words. These truths seemed suddenly more substantial than Blake's. Cruelty for the first time in months Jamie fell asleep without rehearsing. Avoidance strategies for the next day across town in a much larger house. Blake Anderson sat confined to his room, his parents' voices raised in argument, drifting through. The closed door, his father insisting boys will be boys, his mother demanding consequences. Principal Whitman had suspended Blake for 3 days, the tablet recording, leaving no room for denial, no possibility of blaming Jamie. The destruction clearly deliberate, clearly malicious. Blake's carefully cultivated image of charming mischief maker revealed as something darker. Monday morning, Jamie walked to school. His steps measured but not hurried, his mind unusually quiet-centered in a decision made. During the weekend's reflection, Blake would return to school Thursday, according to gossip that circulated among students, giving Jamie 3 days to prepare, 3 days to practice what he would say, how he would stand, what boundaries he would establish. He had asked his father to help role-playing various scenarios in the privacy of their apartment. Robert playing Blake with surprising insight. Jamie rehearsing responses until they felt natural, authentic in class. Jamie noticed subtle changes more. Students acknowledging him with nods, greetings, brief conversations about the science fair, his project, his ribbon, the story of Blake's sabotage having spread through school gossip networks. Zoe continued her quiet friendship, sitting with him at lunch, sharing books, recommending stories from the library. Miss Abernathy encouraged his participation, drawing him into discussions, recognizing his contributions. But Jamie's focus remained internal, preparing for Thursday's inevitable confrontation. Wednesday evening, he stood before the bathroom mirror, shoulders back, chin lifted the way his father had demonstrated, meeting his own eyes in the glass. "You deserve respect," he told his reflection. "You haven't done anything wrong." His mother passed the open door, pausing at the unusual sight. "You okay, Jamie?" she asked, concerned in her tired eyes. He turned, surprising her with a hug. "I'm good, Mom. Just practicing something for school." She held him close for a moment. "You seem different lately," she observed, more like your old self. Jimmy considered this. "I think maybe I am," he said, realizing the truth in the words as he spoke. Them something was returning, not unchanged, not unscathed, but recognizable, a sense of self that had been buried beneath months of shame and isolation. That night, Jamie stood before the mirror, no longer practicing how not to cry, but instead meeting his own eyes. Squarely, shoulders back, chin lifted the way his father had shown him, whispering the words he would say tomorrow. Words that terrified him, but somehow felt like coming home to himself. Thursday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine after days of gray skies. Jamie dressed with particular care, choosing his cleanest jeans, least worn shirt, combing his hair with unusual attention. His mother noticed the difference, raising an eyebrow. As he rejected his usual cereal in favor of toast with peanut butter for extra protein, his father had suggested big day, she asked, spreading jam on Lily's breakfast toast. Jamie nodded. "Something like that," he replied, not wanting to worry her with explanations of confrontations and bullies. She had enough concerns. His walk to school felt different. His awareness heightened, colors sharper, sounds clearer, as if the decision to stop hiding had awakened his senses. He arrived earlier than usual, deliberately choosing to enter through the main doors rather than his usual side entrance, walking the central hallway, head up, eyes forward. A few students nodded, greetings. Someone mentioned the science fair ribbon, a tentative high five offered. By a classmate, these small interactions, once avoided, now accepted with quiet acknowledgement. First period passed in a blur of anticipation. Jamie's focus scattered, his eyes repeatedly drawn to the classroom door, expecting Blake's arrival. But the morning continued without incident. Second period, then third lunch approaching, with no sign of the fourth grade bully. Perhaps Blake's suspension had been extended. Perhaps he was absent. Perhaps he would avoid Jamie altogether. The possibility both. Relieved and disappointed, Jamie having prepared so thoroughly for a confrontation that might not occur in the cafeteria. Jamie took his usual corner table, unwrapping his simple sandwich. Zoe joining him without comment, their companionable silence. A comfort amid the lunchroom chaos. Halfway through the meal, he spotted Blake entering, flanked by Tyler and two other fourth graders. Blake's eyes immediately scanning the room, locking onto Jamie's table, his expression darkening with recognition. Jamie felt his heart rate accelerate, breath-catching preparation. Suddenly inadequate in the face of actual confrontation, Zoe noticed his tension following his gaze to Blake. "He'll probably leave you alone," she said quietly. The principal warned him. Jamie shook his head, watching Blake whisper something to his friends, their laughter directed his way. "I don't think so," he replied, the certainty settling in his stomach like a stone. Minutes passed. Jamie forcing himself to continue eating, though food had lost all taste. Blake's group taking their usual table, casting occasional glances toward Jamie, their pantomimed conversations clearly about him, though distance obscured the actual words. Jamie waited for the inevitable approach, mentally rehearsing his practiced responses until suddenly clarity descended over him like cool water. All the careful phrases forgotten in favor of simple truth. He would speak honestly, directly, without performance or preparation. When Blake finally approached lunch, period nearly over his movement, deliberately casual expression, smug, Jamie felt oddly calm watching his tormentors progress across the cafeteria. The fear that had defined their previous interactions replaced by something steadier, more grounded. Blake stopped before Jamie's table. Tyler and friends positioned behind him, creating an audience for whatever would follow. "Heard you've been talking about me, poor boy." Blake said, his voice pitched to carry to nearby tables, telling everyone, "I broke your stupid project." Jamie stood slowly, surprising both Blake and himself by choosing to meet the confrontation at eye level. Though he remained significantly shorter than the fourth grader, "I haven't been talking about you," he replied, his voice clear. In the suddenly quietening cafeteria, "But you did break our project on purpose." Blake's eyes narrowed at Jamie's unexpected directness. "You can't prove anything." "That video was an accident," he said, less certain than his usual taunts. Jamie met his gaze directly. "We both know it wasn't an accident. You were mad. We won first place, while you got second." Blake stepped closer, using his height advantage to intimidate you. "Think you're smart now, Matthews, just because you got lucky with some stupid water project," he sneered. "Everybody knows your dad's a useless cripple, and your mom cleans toilets for a living." Jamie's heart hammered so hard he was certain everyone could hear it, his legs trembling beneath him like saplings in a storm. But he kept his eyes level with Blake's, refusing to look down, refusing to shrink, even as the older boy rose to his full height, towering over him like a gathering thundercloud. The cafeteria had fallen silent, students at nearby tables watching with undisguised interest, teachers not yet noticing the confrontation unfolding. "My dad taught me how to build things," Jamie said, his voice steady, despite his racing heart, "and my mom works hard to take care of us." "There's nothing wrong with that," Blake laughed. But the sound lacked conviction. Jamie's unexpected response throwing him off. "Script, look at you defending your pathetic family," he said, shoving Jamie's shoulder, causing him to step back involuntarily. Jamie regained his balance, something crystallizing inside him, a certainty that transcended fear. "Stop pushing me, Blake," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Stop destroying my things. Stop making fun of my family. Just stop." Blake's face flushed with anger. "Who do you think you're talking to, poor boy?" he demanded, shoving Jamie harder this time, causing him to bump against the table. "You're nothing. You're nobody." Jamie steadied himself against the table's edge, taking a deep breath before speaking again. "I'm not nothing," he said, "and I'm not poor. Boy, my name is Jamie Matthews. I'm good at building things. I won the science fair, and I don't deserve how you treat me." The cafeteria had gone completely silent now. Students frozen in place, watching the unprecedented scene of the smallest second grader standing up to the notorious fourth grade bully. Even Blake seemed momentarily stunned by Jamie's transformation from silent victim to vocal self-advocate. "You think anyone cares what you deserve," Blake finally responded, reaching for Jamie's lunch. Try the familiar move of a bully retreating to physical dominance when verbal tactics fail. Jamie reacted without thinking, blocking Blake's hand with his arm. "Look at my phone," he said, pulling his mother's old smartphone from his pocket, the one she'd given him for emergencies, pressing play on the video Zoe had transferred from her father's tablet to Jamie's device. The screen clearly showing Blake deliberately pushing over their science project. Blake lunged for the phone, knocking it from Jamie's hand, sending it skittering across the floor, the commotion finally attracting cafeteria monitors' attention. But Jamie no longer cared about intervention, about punishment, about consequences he had found. His voice had spoken. His truth had declared his boundaries regardless of outcome. Something fundamental had shifted inside him that could never be reversed. Everyone saw that. Jamie said as teachers approached, "Everyone knows what you did now, just like they'll know what you just did." His voice unwavering despite Blake's looming presence, the balance of power visibly tilting. As nearby students nodded, murmured agreement, some even moving to retrieve Jamie's phone. "Preserve the evidence." The cafeteria monitor reached the principal. Whitman, right behind her. "What's happening here?" she demanded. "He started it," Blake immediately declared, pointing accusingly at Jamie before anyone could speak. Further, "Blake says he has a video of me. He's threatening me." Principal Whitman's expression remained neutral as she surveyed the scene, noting Jamie's defensive posture, Blake's aggressive stance, the unusual silence of the cafeteria, suggesting something significant had occurred. Jamie's phone now in the hands of a sixth-grade girl who had retrieved it from the floorboard of "You to my office," she set her tone, leaving no room for argument. "Zoe, please come as well," she added, noticing Zoe half rising from her seat. "The rest of you finish lunch." She addressed the watching students, her authoritative presence gradually dispersing the audience, returning the cafeteria to its normal chaotic volume. The walk to the principal's office felt surreal to Jamie, his heart still racing from the confrontation, yet a strange calmness settling over him. The outcome no longer mattering as much as the action itself. He had spoken, had stood his ground regardless of consequences. Blake walked ahead, shoulders rigid, face flushed with anger or embarrassment. Possibly both. Zoe fell into step beside Jamie, not speaking, but her presence communicating. Solidarity in the outer office. Principal Whitman's secretary raised her eyebrows at the unusual group. "Mrs. Anderson has already been called," she informed the principal. "She's on her way." "Principal." Whitman nodded. "Let's wait for her." "Then," she said, gesturing. The three children to chairs along the wall. The minutes ticked by in uncomfortable silence. Blake shooting venomous glares at Jamie, Zoe sitting straight, hands folded in her lap. Jamie breathing deeply, focusing on remaining present, not retreating. Into his familiar protective invisibility, Mrs. Anderson arrived in a whirlwind of designer perfume and barely contained irritation. "This is becoming ridiculous," she announced before even greeting the principal. "Blake has already been punished for the science fair incident, which was clearly an accident." Despite what that tablet showed, Principal Whitman's expression didn't change. "Please join us in my office." "Mrs. Anderson," she said calmly, extending her arm toward the door once seated around the principal's desk. Whitman addressed Jamie first. "Tell me what happened in the cafeteria." "James." Jamie glanced at Blake, then at Mrs. Anderson, before returning his attention to the principal. "Blake came to my table and started saying things about my family. I asked him to stop pushing me and to stop destroying my things." He gestured toward Zoe. "I have the video from the science fair on my phone." Now Blake tried to grab it when I showed him. Mrs. Anderson interrupted. "This is absurd." Children argue all the time. "My Blake wouldn't." Principal Whitman raised a hand to stop her. "We'll hear everyone." "Mrs. Anderson," she said, turning to Zoe. "Your perspective, please." Zoe spoke quietly but clearly. "Blake has been bullying Jamie since he came to Westbrook, destroys Jamie's things, calls him names, pushes him today." Jamie just asked him to stop. Blake's face reddened. That's a lie. She's just saying that because she's his friend. Ask anyone else? At that moment, a knock interrupted them. Miss Abernathy entering. With Jamie's phone, I believe this is relevant, she said, placing it on the principal's desk with the video queued up. Principal Whitman watched the recording, which showed not only the science fair sabotage, but continued to reveal today's cafeteria. Confrontation captured by Zoe, who had begun recording when Blake approached their table. Mrs. Anderson's expression shifted as she watched her son's actions, caught in undeniable clarity from the deliberate destruction of the science project to the aggressive shoving in the cafeteria, the evidence presenting a pattern of behavior impossible to dismiss as misunderstanding or accident. This doesn't prove anything, Mrs. Anderson attempted. Nevertheless, clearly they provoked him. Somehow children can be so cruel to each other, Principal. Whitman sighed heavily. Mrs. Anderson, this is the third incident involving Blake this month. The evidence is quite clear. I must insist on appropriate consequences. Mrs. Anderson straightened her already perfect posture. Consequences, she repeated, as if the word were foreign. My husband will be hearing about this. He's on the school board, you know. She turned her attention to Jamie, her expression calculating. You're the Matthews boy, aren't you? Her tone making. The name sounded like an accusation from the Green Ridge Apartments. Jamie nodded, meeting her gaze directly. Yes, ma'am. Something. In his steady response seemed to unsettle her. She turned back to Principal Whitman. This is ridiculous. Our family has donated substantial funds to Westbrook Elementary. I expect this matter to be handled appropriately. I assure you it will be, Principal. Whitman replied, her voice firm. But Blake will face consequences for his actions consistent with our anti-bullying policy, which includes 2-week suspension and mandatory counseling. Blake stared at his mother in disbelief. 2 weeks, he protested. That's not fair. Mrs. Anderson stood gathering her designer handbag. I'm taking Blake home now. We'll be discussing this with our attorney, the implied threat hanging in the air as she gestured sharply for Blake to follow. Once they had departed, Principal Whitman turned to Jamie and Zoe. Thank you both for your honesty, she said. I apologize that this situation continued. As long as it did, Jamie, you showed remarkable courage today. Jamie sat quietly, absorbing her words. The principal's validation, both surprising and affirming. Zoe smiled beside him. Clearly pleased with the outcome, Miss Abernathy gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze before excusing herself to return to her classroom. As they left the office heading back toward their respective classes, Jamie noticed students watching him whispering. But the quality had changed from mockery to something like respect, Tyler Blake's usual sidekick. Actually nodded as they passed in the hallway, the subtle shift in social dynamics immediately apparent. Jamie, I want you to know, Principal Whitman said. Walking them partway, I've spoken with Miss Abernathy about your science project. She's arranged for you and Zoe to rebuild it for the district competition next month. If you're interested, Jamie glanced at Zoe, who nodded eagerly. Thank you, he said, we'd like that. The rest of the day passed in a blur of normalcy, made extraordinary by small changes, classmates including him in conversation during group work, a boy named Marcus asking if he wanted to play basketball at recess. The invisible barrier between Jamie and his peers not completely dissolved, but significantly weakened by his public stand against Blake. At home, Jamie recounted the day's events to his father, who listened with undisguised pride. You stood your ground. Son Robert said, that takes real courage. I was scared, Jamie admitted. His father nodded. That's what makes it. Courage, doing something despite being afraid, not. Despite feeling fear, was everything resolved? Jamie considered the question. Blake got suspended for 2 weeks and has to go to counseling, but his mom was really angry. She mentioned lawyers. Robert's expression sobered. Unfortunately, that's often how these situations play out. The Anderson family has money, influence. They may try to minimize consequences, but he reached out, squeezing Jamie's shoulder. The important thing is you spoke your truth. You set boundaries regardless of what happens next. You've reclaimed your power. That's what matters. That evening at dinner, Jamie's mother noticed the change in both her men. Robert more engaged than he had been in months. Jamie more animated, telling Lily stories about school, answering her questions with newfound confidence. The apartment still cramped, still showing signs of their financial struggles, but somehow less defined by absence, less shadowed by what they had lost. After Lily was asleep, after dishes were washed and homework completed, Jamie sat beside his father on the couch, television, murmuring in the background. "Dad," he said hesitantly, "I've been thinking about what happened today." Robert muted the TV, turning his attention to his son. "I don't think Blake is just mean." Jamie continued, remembering the expression on Blake's face when his mother dismissed the evidence, her focus on connections, reputation, rather than her son's behavior. "I think maybe something's wrong at his house, too." The next 2 weeks brought changes, both subtle and profound. Jamie noticed students speaking to him in hallways, including him in playground games, inviting him to birthday parties. He mostly declined, still uncomfortable with social gatherings in homes where his circumstances might become more obvious. But the invitations themselves represented a shift in his status, no longer the invisible boy, but someone seen, acknowledged, worthy of inclusion. His friendship with Zoe deepened as they began rebuilding their science project for the district competition meeting after school at the public library, incorporating improvements suggested by Mr. Chen, adding activated carbon layers, developing more precise measurement protocols. Sometimes Lily joined them, sitting quietly coloring while they worked. Jamie gradually sharing more about his family, his father's accident, their previous life, the words coming easier with practice. Miss Abernathy noticed the transformation, commenting to Jamie's mother during conference night, "He's blossoming, Sarah," she said. His academic performance has always been strong, but now he's participating, engaging with peers, showing leadership potentials. Era Matthews brushed away unexpected tears. "I was so worried about him," she admitted. "The move was hard on all of us, but Jamie especially. He just seemed to disappear into himself." Miss Abernathy nodded. "Children are remarkably resilient when given the right support," she said, "and Jamie has shown extraordinary courage standing up to Blake was a turning point for him." Their teachers reported similar observations. Mr. Jensen noting Jamie's contributions to science discussions. Mrs. Peterson, the music teacher, mentioning how he had volunteered to help younger students with rhythm instruments during assembly practice. Even Mrs. Whitaker, the stern physical education teacher, commented on his improved participation effort during class activities. Blake's absence created space for these changes to take root. Without daily intimidation, Jamie found himself relaxing more at school, laughing occasionally, raising his hand without second-guessing his answers. One afternoon, Principal Whitman stopped him in the hallway to share that several students had come forward after the cafeteria incident, reporting their own experiences with Blake's bullying. "You helped others find their voice, James," she told him, "that takes special courage." The district science competition approached rapidly, Jamie and Zoe spending every available moment perfecting their project, Mr. Chen providing materials, technical advice, enthusiastic support. Occasionally, Robert would join these sessions, his engineering knowledge complementing Mr. Chen's, his mobility gradually improving. As he reduced pain medications, increased physical therapy, his mental clarity returning alongside his engagement with the world. On the morning of the competition, Jamie woke early, butterflies fluttering in his stomach, but excitement rather than dread propelling him through breakfast preparations. His mother had arranged the day off from all 3 jobs, determined to attend Lily, bouncing with anticipation at seeing Big Brother's science project. Robert moved slowly, but insisted on coming, using the cane rather than wheelchair. For the first time in months, the family arriving together at the convention center, where regional schools displayed student projects, the competition level significantly higher than the school science fair. sophisticated projects from middle schools, high schools surrounding their elementary-level entry. But Jamie felt prepared, confident in their design, their presentation, their understanding of scientific principles. Zoe equally composed in her neat dress hair pulled back with practical clips as judges circulated clipboard notes. Critical questions. When their turn came, Jamie and Zoe worked seamlessly together, demonstrating water purification, explaining filtration principles, answering technical inquiries with surprising authority for second graders. The judges, visibly impressed by their knowledge depth, clarity, Jamie spoke without hesitation, his voice steady, his passion for the project evident in detailed explanations, Zoe providing precise data measurement protocols together, presenting a comprehensive understanding beyond their years as they completed their presentation. Jamie glanced toward the audience section, spotting his family, his father giving thumbs up, his mother smiling proudly, Lily waving enthusiastically beside them. Surprisingly, he noticed Blake Anderson sitting with a man Jamie assumed was his father. Blake's expression unreadable, but watching intently, the 2 weeks of suspension apparently ended the Andersons' presence. Unexpected concerning, awards wouldn't be announced until afternoon, leaving Jamie and Zoe free to explore other projects. Lily skipping between them, holding both their hands. Her excitement contagious as they examined robotics displays, chemical reactions, astronomical models, the convention center humming with scientific energy conversations, ideas, hypotheses surrounding them like invisible currents during lunch break. Jamie spotted Blake approaching alone, his usual confidence dimmed posture, uncertain. Jamie tensed automatically before remembering his father's words about courage, about boundaries, about speaking truth. He waited as Blake stopped several feet away, hands jammed in pockets, eyes downcast. Nice project. He muttered the words, barely audible. Thank you, Jamie replied cautiously. My dad made me come. Blake continued. Wanted me to see what real science looks like. He said, I've been doing stupid counseling. He shifted awkwardly. They say I have to apologize to you. Make amends, whatever. Jamie studied, him noting the absence of Blake's usual swagger, the defensive hunching of shoulders, the flicker of something like embarrassment or shame in downcast eyes. You don't have to apologize if you don't mean it, Jamie said finally. Blake looked up surprised. By this response, I did mean to wreck your project, he admitted, but I shouldn't have his voice dropping lower. My dad says I'm just like my grandfather, mean insecure bully. He calls it something to fix before I become a real Anderson man. Jamie remained, silent, sensing Blake needed to speak more than he needed response. Maybe I could help rebuild it. Sometime Blake offered the suggestion clearly, painful, clearly forced by parental direction, but containing perhaps a grain of genuine remorse. That's okay, Jamie said. We already rebuilt it, but thanks for offering something. In Blake's expression, shifted relief, perhaps, or recognition of the generosity in Jamie's response. I should go, Blake said. My dad's waiting, his voice dropping even lower. They're getting divorced, you know. My mom and dad. He says it's not my fault, but he kicked his toe against the convention center floor, trailing off. I'm sorry, Jamie said, meaning it, understanding suddenly how homes could collapse in different ways than his. Own head, Blake shrugged. Whatever, see you at school Monday. He turned, walking away, posture straightening with each step, returning to his father, who watched from a distance, expression unreadable. Zoe appeared at Jamie's side, silently offering a juice box. What did he want, she asked. Jamie considered the question. He wanted to apologize, I think, or try to, the afternoon awards ceremony. Found Jamie's family seated beside the Chen's unexpected allies in supporting their children's partnership as judges. Announced winners by category elementary division names called, ribbons distributed, finally reaching water purification, environmental science. Jamie held his breath as Zoe squeezed his hand gently. Second place, Westbrook Elementary, James Matthews. And Zoe Chen, the announcer called. Jamie felt momentary disappointment quickly replaced by pride as they walked to the stage, accepting certificates, handshakes, congratulations from official second place at district level. Still remarkable for second graders. Miss Abernathy had explained when preparing them for possible outcomes from the audience, his parents applauded his father, standing despite obvious pain pride, visible even at distance, Jamie holding their certificate high for them to see Lily jumping, up and down in excitement. Mr. Chen capturing everything on camera. Mrs. Chen dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, the moment crystallizing for Jamie. A perfect convergence of achievement, recognition, family support. Something healing settling into place inside him. Spring arrived at Westbrook Elementary, bringing with it standardized testing field trips, planning for the following school year. As Jamie's second grade experience approached its conclusion, he reflected on the transformation of the past months. From invisible boy to recognized student, from isolated target to accepted peer, the changes weren't magical or complete. Sometimes he still ate lunch alone by choice. Sometimes whispers still followed him in hallways, but the quality had shifted. From mockery to simple observation, the respect he'd earned through standing up to Blake, creating a protective buffer around him. Science fair certificate hung in the Matthews apartment, framed by Robert, who had built the simple wooden frame. Himself a small victory in his ongoing physical recovery, Lily had created colorful decorations around it, adding glitter star stickers, proclamations of Big Brother's genius that made Jamie both embarrassed and secretly pleased their mother had moved to a better-paying hospital position with regular hours, weekends off. Her exhaustion lessening as family stability gradually returned. Financial struggles remained, the lawsuit against the construction company, still unresolved medical bills accumulating, but perspective had shifted, priorities clarified by their journey through hardship. Sarah had explained to Jamie during a rare quiet moment, when it's just stuff you lose, it doesn't matter so much. But when you start losing yourself or each other, that's when you have to fight back hard. She had hugged him close. That's what you did, Jamie. When you stood up for yourself, you showed us all how to fight back. On a warm May morning, Mr. Jensen announced a special end-of-year engineering project, building mini solar-powered cars working in teams of 3. Jamie automatically glanced at Zoe, their partnership. Now established, comfortable, before Mr. Jensen continued, I'll be assigning groups this time, mixing students with different strengths. Jamie found himself teamed with Marcus, a naturally athletic boy who had recently begun including Jamie in recess games. And surprisingly, Blake, their first interaction since Blake's return to school following suspension, and the brief conversation at the science competition, tension immediately apparent as Marcus looked between them uncertainly. This okay? Jamie, Mr. Jensen asked quietly, as students gathered supplies, clearly aware of the history between the boys. Jamie considered the question genuinely, uncertain, but nodded, willing to attempt collaboration. Blake avoided eye contact, gathering materials following instructional handouts, with unusual focus as they began constructing their vehicle. Jamie found himself automatically taking leadership, explaining connections, demonstrating techniques, knowledge flowing from his hands to the materials, the same way his father had once shown. Him, Blake watched, initially resistant, then gradually contributing ideas, suggesting modifications, his natural intelligence emerging without the protective layer of aggression that had previously defined him. Marcus provided enthusiastic testing, physical adjustments, mechanical adjustments, until their solar car began taking shape, a genuinely impressive engineering project combining their distinct strengths. We need to reduce friction here, Jamie suggested, demonstrating with the wheel assembly, Blake unexpectedly agreeing, offering a solution involving graphite from pencil lead, Marcus implementing the fix with careful fingers, the 3 boys finding unexpected harmony in shared purpose, creation overshadowing past conflicts as the project neared completion. Their car demonstrating superior speed design. Compared to other groups Blake approached. Jamie during cleanup, what you said before about my parents, he began, awkwardly referring to their science competition conversation. "You were right. It wasn't my fault. They've been fighting forever." Jamie nodded, uncertain how to respond. "My dad says I was acting out." Blake continued, repeating counseling terminology with self-conscious discomfort, "taking stuff out on kids like you, because I was angry about home stuff. Understand?" Jamie said simply. Blake studied him. "Why aren't you still mad? I would?" Bijami considered this, carefully remembering his father's words about anger as fuel. "Not destruction. Being mad doesn't help," he said finally. "It just makes everything harder." Something in Blake's expression shifted. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. Before Marcus bounded over, interrupting with excitement about their car's performance, the moment passing, but something subtle changing between them. Not friendship, exactly, but a truce understanding that transcended their history. The last week of school brought field day traditions. Jamie participating in relay races for the first time, rather than finding excuses to avoid physical activities. His father attending in his wheelchair on bad pain days, his cane on better ones, watching from sidelines. With undisguised pride as Jamie ran past. Batons laughed with teammates, Lily bouncing beside Robert, making enough noise for 3 children as she cheered her brother's team graduation ceremony. For 5th graders included a 2nd grade musical. Performance Jamie singing with his classmates. His voice quiet but present, no longer hiding, no longer afraid of being noticed. His mother recording on her phone, tears in her eyes at this simple, normal childhood moment, once taken for granted now. Precious for its ordinariness. On the final day of school, Miss Abernathy presented each student with personalized certificates. Jamie's recognizing most improved participation and excellence in science. Her handwritten note adding, "I knew you were extraordinary from the first day. Jamie, just waiting for you to discover it yourself. I can't wait to see what you build next year." Classmates exchange phone numbers, summer plans. Jamie carefully writing Zoe's information in his notebook, accepting. Invitations to playground meetups, neighborhood games with tentative excitement. The summer stretching before him. Not with dread of isolation, but possibility of connection. His mother had already arranged for both Jamie and Lily to attend the community center's free summer program 3 days weekly, where swimming lessons, craft projects, supervised activities would provide structure normalcy during school break. Cleaning. Out his desk, Jamie found his old communication card from Mrs. Peterson's attempted social skills group, the one identifying him as needing support with peer interactions. He smiled slightly at the outdated assessment, tucking it into his backpack as Miss Abernathy approached, ready for summer. "James," she asked, her use of his full name always making him stand slightly taller. Jamie nodded, looking around the classroom that had transformed from place of anxiety to space of growth for 3rd grade. "I want to join the engineering club." He said the words coming easily now when planning. "For his future, can I even? Though it's usually for older kids." Miss Abernathy smiled. "I've already spoken with Mr. Jensen about making an exception for you. He's quite impressed with your abilities." As Jamie left school that afternoon, backpack filled with completed work art projects, end-of-year mementos, he noticed a new student touring the building with Principal Whitman clearly preparing for enrollment next fall. The boy walking with hunched shoulders, eyes downcast, familiar body language. Of someone attempting invisibility, Jamie recognized immediately the protective posture of a child expecting rejection. The same posture he had adopted during his own first days at Westbrook. Jamie watched the boy's halting progress, his mother's gentle encouragement, the principal's practiced welcome speech, remembering his own arrival months earlier, the isolation that had seemed inescapable, the small kindnesses that had eventually accumulated into transformation. Miss Abernathy's granola, bars, Zoe's colored pencils, his father's wisdom, his mother's determination, each contributing to his gradual emergence from silence impulsively. Jamie approached the new boy, hand extended high. "I'm Jamie," he said simply. I'll be in third grade next year. If you need someone to show you around or anything." The boy looked up, startled by this unexpected greeting, hesitating before taking Jamie's hand. "I'm David?" He whispered, his mother's expression of surprised gratitude communicating volumes about previous school experiences. Jamie smiled, understanding. Sometimes courage isn't about grand gestures or perfect words. It's about remembering who you are, even when the world has forgotten about extending a hand, when your own has been empty for so long. Jamie had learned that standing tall wasn't just about facing bullies. It was about becoming the person who ensures no one else has to stand alone.